Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire civilization is wiped off the map? Not just defeated, but utterly annihilated. That's the story of Carthage, a vibrant maritime empire, and its rival, Rome. The final words of the Roman senator Cato the Elder, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed were not just a political slogan. They were a death sentence. In 146 BC, after 3 brutal Punic Wars, Rome didn't just conquer Carthage. It razed the city to the ground, sold its people into slavery, and legend says, even sowed its fields with salt to ensure nothing would ever grow again. But what were the real consequences of this cataclysmic event? The fall of Carthage wasn't just the end of one story. It was the explosive beginning of another, the story of the Roman Empire. The destruction of its greatest rival marked a point of no return that would reshape the Mediterranean and, ultimately, the entire Western world. Join me as we explore how from the ashes of Carthage, the Roman Empire rose to unprecedented power, and how the echoes of that ancient conflict still resonate today. Let's rewind. Before its fall, Carthage was a powerhouse. Located in modern-day Tunisia, it controlled a vast trading network across the Mediterranean. Its navy was legendary, its wealth immense, and its influence stretched from North Africa to Spain. Rome, at the time, was a rising republic on the Italian peninsula, ambitious and militaristic, but still just one of several major players. The Punic Wars were a clash of titans, a struggle for dominance that lasted over a century. The Second Punic War, with Hannibal's audacious crossing of the Alps with elephants, is one of history's most famous military campaigns. Hannibal brought Rome to its knees, but he couldn't deliver the final blow. This near-death experience hardened Rome, fueling a desire not just for victory, but for total security. And total security meant the complete elimination of Carthage as a threat. The Third Punic War was less a war and more an execution. Rome, now overwhelmingly powerful, laid siege to a much weakened Carthage, and the result was inevitable. The city's destruction was a brutal and terrifying message to the world. Defy Rome, and this is your fate. This act of strategic annihilation cleared the board. With no major rival left in the Western Mediterranean, a massive power vacuum was created, and Rome was more than ready to fill it. The fall of Carthage wasn't just a military victory. It was the moment Rome's mindset shifted from republic to empire, from defense to dominance. With Carthage gone, Rome's expansion went into overdrive. The former Carthaginian territories were like ripe fruit, ready for the picking. Sicily, Corsica, and Sardinia, which had been contested for decades, were now firmly under Roman control. These islands weren't just dots on a map. They were strategic naval bases and, more importantly, a vital source of grain. Control of the granaries of the Mediterranean meant Rome could feed its growing population and its massive armies, securing its internal stability. The conquest didn't stop there. Roman legions pushed into Spain, absorbing the rich silver mines that had once funded Hannibal's campaigns. They consolidated control over North Africa, turning vast swaths of fertile land into Roman provinces. In a matter of decades, the Mediterranean Sea, once a shared space of commerce and conflict, began to be known by a new name, Mare Nostrum, or Our Sea. This territorial expansion was unprecedented. For the first time, a single power controlled the coastlines from the Strait of Gibraltar to the shores of Greece. This unification of the Mediterranean basin under Roman rule facilitated trade, communication, and the movement of troops on a scale never seen before. The infrastructure of empire roads, aqueducts, and ports began to snake across this new, vast territory, knitting it together under a single administration. The destruction of Carthage had directly paved the way for Rome to become the undisputed master of the Mediterranean world. The influx of wealth from these new territories was staggering. Imagine caravans of gold and silver from Spanish mines, ships laden with grain from Africa and Sicily, and a flood of enslaved people from conquered lands, all pouring into Rome. This new wealth transformed the Roman economy, but not everyone benefited equally. A new class of super-rich emerged, the equestrians, or business class, who profited immensely from war contracts, tax farming, and land speculation. They built lavish villas through extravagant parties and lived lives of unimaginable luxury. At the same time, this new wealth destroyed the backbone of the old Roman Republic, the small-scale citizen farmer. While these farmers were away, fighting in Rome's endless wars, their lands were often neglected. Unable to compete with the cheap grain flooding in from the provinces, produced on massive estates called latifundia, worked by slave labor, many small farmers went bankrupt. They were forced to sell their ancestral lands to the wealthy elite and flocked to the city of Rome, seeking work. This created a huge, impoverished urban population known as the proletariat. This growing gap between the ultra-rich and the desperately poor created immense social and political tension. The old republican values of duty, austerity, and civic virtue began to erode, replaced by greed and political corruption. This economic disparity would fuel a century of civil strife, from the populist reforms of the Gracchi brothers to the rise of powerful generals like Marius and Sulla, who recruited soldiers from the landless poor, promising them land and booty in exchange for loyalty not to the state, but to them personally. The wealth that came from destroying Carthage, ironically, sowed the seeds of the Republic's own destruction. This social and economic turmoil forced a radical transformation in Roman governance. The old republican system, designed for a small city-state, was simply not equipped to manage a sprawling, multicultural empire. The Senate, once the venerable heart of Roman politics, became an arena for factional infighting among powerful families. The institutions of the Republic began to crack under the strain. The rise of powerful generals who commanded the personal loyalty of their armies was a direct threat to the Senate's authority. Figures like Julius Caesar, who conquered Gaul and amassed incredible wealth and a veteran army, could challenge the state itself. The civil wars that racked the late Republic were essentially a struggle to answer one question: who should rule Rome? The traditional collective leadership of the Senate, or a single, powerful autocrat? In the end, after decades of bloodshed, Caesar's heir, Octavian, emerged victorious. He cleverly maintained the facade of the Republic, with its Senate and assemblies, but concentrated all real power in his own hands. He took the title Augustus, the first Roman emperor. This new system, the Principate, provided the stability the empire desperately needed. This transition from republic to empire, born from the consequences of Rome's aggressive expansion, created a model of governance that would influence Western civilization for millennia. Concepts like a professional civil service, a unified legal code that applied to all citizens, and the very idea of a centralized state ruling over diverse peoples were honed and perfected by the Roman Empire. Many of our modern political structures, from legal principles to administrative systems, have their distant roots in the solutions Rome devised to manage the empire it won after Carthage fell. The fall of Carthage also represented a major cultural shift. For centuries, the center of gravity in the Mediterranean had been contested. Carthage was a Phoenician colony, representing a Semitic North African culture with deep roots in the ancient Near East. Its religion, its language, and its traditions were distinct from the Greco-Roman world. Its destruction was not just the removal of a political rival, but the symbolic victory of one cultural sphere over another. With Carthage gone, the cultural and intellectual heart of the Mediterranean shifted decisively to Europe first, to Rome, and by extension to Greece, whose culture Rome so admired and absorbed. Roman Latin became the language of power, administration, and literature across the entire Western Mediterranean, supplanting Punic and other local languages. The Roman pantheon of gods, heavily influenced by the Greek Olympians, spread throughout the provinces, while Rome was often pragmatic, allowing local customs and religions to continue as long as they didn't challenge Roman authority. The overarching cultural framework became undeniably Roman. The African-centric world of Carthage gave way to a Eurocentric one. This had profound long-term consequences. It set the stage for the development of what we now call Western civilization, a cultural lineage that traces itself back through Rome to Greece. Imagine an alternate history where Carthage had won the Punic Wars. The dominant language in Europe might have been a derivative of Punic. The major religious and philosophical ideas might have flowed from North Africa and the Levant, rather than from Athens and Rome. The fall of Carthage didn't just ensure Rome's political dominance, it ensured the dominance of a Greco-Roman cultural template that would define Europe for the next 2,000 years. So, the destruction of Carthage was far more than just one city's tragic end. It was the catalyst that transformed a regional republic into a world empire. It unleashed a torrent of wealth that reshaped Roman society, creating deep divisions that ultimately led to the downfall of the republic itself. From the chaos of civil war, a new political order emerged: the Roman Empire, a system of governance whose legacy is still embedded in our world today. And finally, it cemented the cultural dominance of Europe in the Mediterranean, setting a course for history that we are still on. The story of Rome and Carthage is a powerful reminder of how a single event, a single act of utter destruction, can have consequences that ripple through centuries, shaping economies, political systems, and the very cultural identity of future civilizations. The ruins of Carthage became the foundations of the Roman Empire, a legacy written in stone, law, and language, reminding us that empires are often built on the ashes of their rivals. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient history, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you do unmiss our next exploration of the past. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.